congratulations. You have made it to day 3. So look to your left, look to your right. Not everybody has done what you have been able to do. So we're super excited. This is it. This is really the culmination of 3 days. So we're going to build on day 1 and on day 2 and day 3. And we're going to bring it all home at 11. But before we get to 11, we're going to hear from Ms. Grace Mena, and she's going to tell us about the following. Volunteers are the backbone of cyber civil defense. If you are ready to join the community, the cyber defense fight, but don't know where to start, this talk is for you. And I can see right now, there's a bunch of people who this talk is for in this room. We'll map the current volunteering efforts, pinpoint the crucial coordinated strategic actions still needed to scale their services, and introduce the Cyber Resilience Corps, your one-stop shop to identify which volunteering groups you are eligible to join. So please put your hands together and welcome Ms. Grace Mena.
Okay, let's see if this thing's on. It sounds like it's working. Can you all hear me? Can I get a thumbs up? Amazing. Well, good morning, everybody. Happy last day of BSides Las Vegas. I'm really thrilled to be here with you all today. And I'm going to be talking about cyber civil defense. For a quick show of hands, how many of you have heard this term before? Okay, a decent amount of you. Well, if you haven't, cyber civil defense is essentially the fight to protect under-resourced organizations across the US from cyber attacks by a coalition of people, mostly government, local universities, and individuals like yourselves to help bring them above the cyber poverty line. And one of the groups that is a key component of the cyber civil defense is volunteers. And so in today's talk, you're going to hear me lay out a series of short-term and long-term recommendations to build a safety net for these vulnerable organizations, and volunteers are a key part of that. So my name is Grace Mena. I'm a fellow at the UC Berkeley Center for Long-Term Cybersecurity, which we lovingly call the CLTC. And I there conduct public interest cybersecurity research on policy, and I also help co-lead a new initiative called the Cyber Resilience Corps, which is a joint partnership with the Cyber Peace Institute out of Geneva. So, quick show of hands, how many of you saw this headline last week? Okay, a fair amount of you. So if you didn't see the headline, the city of St. Paul was hit with a major attack. And it forced the Minnesota governor to, for the first time ever, call in the National Guard to respond to the incident. 13 individuals from the Cyber Reserve Unit were called in to respond to the attack. And this is happening everywhere, and it's been happening for a long time. This is an example that I like to point to from 2 years ago in my home state of Arizona. The city of Tucson, which is the second largest metropolitan area in Arizona, was hit with a massive attack that ended up taking the school district down for 2 full weeks, leaving kids to not be able to go to school, parents to scramble to find childcare, and also put students 2 weeks behind. Right, but this has been happening and is happening across the US in municipalities, community organizations alike. So you're going to hear me use the word community organizations in the course of this talk. And when I say community organizations, I'm referring to any organization that provides essential services to the public. So this includes municipalities, hospitals, school districts, nonprofits, and sometimes even small and medium-sized businesses. And they're all vulnerable. And the status quo is unsustainable, right? These community organizations that provide essential services to the public are the least prepared to handle cybersecurity threats themselves. And they often cannot afford cybersecurity and lack the in-house expertise to implement these safeguards. And to make matters worse, the attacks actually disproportionately harm the most vulnerable in our population, so especially those living in poverty or in rural areas. We cannot accept the risks of inaction. And so out of that concept, we formed the Cyber Resilience Corps. And as part of the Cyber Resilience Corps, we set out on a journey to map what currently exists to help community organizations and to understand what steps are still needed to be taken to help bring them above the cyber poverty line. And so from January until June of this year, we brought together a group of 30 experts spanning cyber volunteering programs currently in the US, cyber insurance providers, consultants, academics, MSSPs, MSPs, and industry leaders and investors to better understand what exists and where we still need to go. And out of that 6-month journey, we ended up creating a roadmap, and this roadmap lays out a strategic plan for addressing this challenge in the near term and the long-term future. Right, and I think it's important to state that we're in a unique moment right now. The future of cybersecurity defense is at the state and local level. That's what we believe. More and more is being asked of states and regional leaders, and so banding together local universities, nonprofits, and state governments, we believe is the most pragmatic way forward to help build a safety net for these organizations. And so we're looking to create ecosystems of cyber support. So, okay, what exists right now? If you're not already familiar with cyber volunteering programs, actually, quick show of hands, how many of you have heard of any existing cyber volunteering programs? Okay, about half of the room. Well, if you're not already familiar, there are a series of different programs that I'll lay out in a moment, but essentially it's where skilled volunteers volunteer in their free time pro bono services to some combination of SLTT governments, critical infrastructure, nonprofits, and small, medium-sized businesses. And there are essentially 3 major buckets of these types of programs. The first is state civilian cyber corps. Right now, there are 6 of them in the US, and these are state-run volunteer operations, depending on where they're based, maybe under the Department of Emergency Management or the Department of Information Technology. The second is university clinics. So right now, there's over 30 in the US, and they primarily serve critical infrastructure and nonprofits at the moment, but may potentially expand outwards. And then the final is nonprofit-led groups, including I Am the Cavalry, which I'm sure you're going to hear more about a little later, which is doing amazing research and policy work, particularly in regards to critical infrastructure. So these groups, depending on how they're set up and where they're located, provide some combination of the following services: incident response, vulnerability or risk assessments, education training, and threat intel sharing. And they're doing amazing work, but we've identified 6 critical gaps when we were mapping these organizations. The first is that these services are not equally accessible. The second is that organizations who need help don't know where to go. Like I said, some of you didn't even know that these programs existed. What do you think that a nonprofit CEO is going to, do you think that a nonprofit CEO is going to know that these services exist? Most likely not. And so organizations who need help need a more streamlined way to know what services are available to them and by whom. And third, legal and liability challenges continue to create barriers for volunteering services. Right now, there needs to be separate legal agreements on the individual basis and the actual volunteer program itself to protect both volunteers that are volunteering their services and the companies that they work for in their primary capacity. Fourth, after volunteering services are rendered, there is very little pathways of support to continue the cyber hygiene paradigm for these organizations. So we need to build more off-ramps. Fifth, funding for these programs is incredibly volatile, which means that the programs often struggle to mature and expand despite the increase in demand for these services. And sixth, programs face major difficulty collecting standardized metrics on impact. A lot of these programs are relatively new, they're run by volunteers, and they're also set up incredibly different from each other, and so it can be very challenging to not only just compare metrics from program to program, but even from year to year within the same program. And so our work is not done here. We still have a lot of work to do to scale these programs and meet demand. So what can we do? We identified in this roadmap 3 actions that would help immediately build a short-term safety net for community organizations. And they're essentially 3 different buckets of types of recommendations. So the first is to expand cyber volunteering programs. I mentioned earlier that accessibility is a huge issue. Right now, there are at least 22 states in the US who do not have any existing volunteering programs that are regional based. So that's no state civilian cyber corps and no local university clinics. And then on top of that, only 8 states or only 8 of these programs offer any sort of incident response services, which means that if you live in a state that doesn't have a state civilian cyber corps and you're a community organization in need of incident response services and you don't meet the threshold for the National Guard to come in and help, then you're out of luck. And so building off of that expanding cyber volunteering programs, we had 3 sub-recommendations. The first is to prioritize the most threatened organizations. At the end of the day, we need to make sure that resources are being allocated where they're needed most, particularly to critical infrastructure. The second is that we need to continue to invest in the interconnectivity among these programs. They can do more together when they're collaborating, sharing resources and best practices, and handing off community organizations after an engagement to continue services. And finally, we need to continue investing in cyber volunteering, whether that be through government funding or private donors or through foundations that support these organizations. They cannot continue to scale without continued sustainable funding. So the second recommendation is to mature cyber volunteering programs. All community organizations deserve a consistent high level of service, and right now, there are a number of community organizations that go to cyber volunteering programs that are just off the ground and haven't quite figured out their methodology yet. And so we think that we can mature cyber volunteering programs 3 ways. First is by expanding the collection of metrics of volunteering groups' impact. So right now, there are actually a couple of really, really great examples out there that cyber volunteering programs can look to. Indiana's CyberTrack program has a really, really great methodology for tracking the success of the recommendations that they provide to community organizations. So second, we need to clarify liability protections for cyber volunteering. It's great to have these programs, but if volunteers can't be protected from liability when actually rendering their services, then that's going to limit the amount of people that we have that are actually able to help community organizations. And third, we need to improve volunteer and client matching, making sure that the right client organization, community organization, is matched with the right type of volunteer is essential to high levels of service and continued engagement and trust building. Right? So improving, expanding, maturing these programs is great, but the end goal is to get these community organizations to be able to stand up on their own. And so we think that we can do that 3 ways. One, by centralizing common handoff resources. So like I mentioned earlier, the off-ramps for these community organizations are very limited. And so giving them resources that they can use after the service engagement ends will be immensely helpful, whether that's incident response plans, business disaster recovery plans, a list of different types of groups that they are able to contact based off of different types of incidents or situations that they're dealing with is really, really helpful. Because we want to keep the appetite for cyber hygiene ongoing with these organizations after services are rendered. And so building off of that, we want to bolster hands-off procedures after engagements. So sometimes that means passing the baton. So if you're a state civilian cyber corps, passing the baton to a local university clinic who can help provide proactive services that continues that spectrum of cyber hygiene after the incident response services are rendered. And finally, help organizations find full-time support. Right now, it is incredibly hard for the majority of community organizations to obtain MSSP or MSP services. Not only is it incredibly expensive, but a lot of these organizations don't know what to look for when going through the contracting process. And so creating some sort of guidance for these community organizations to use when they're going out and trying to build relationships with MSPs and MSSPs will be immensely helpful to getting them to be able to have that full-time support. So those 3 recommendations were for the short term, right? We believe that those will help create a safety net immediately. And we recognize that this is not a long-term solution, right? Cyber volunteering programs are doing a lot of amazing work, and they are incredibly important for the current moment. And we want to get to a place where hopefully community organizations are not relying entirely on cyber volunteering organizations to help patch the gap. And so we identified 3 long-term solutions that we believe will help. So the first is that companies must simplify cybersecurity for non-experts. I'm sure you've heard that a lot during the course of this B-Sides, right? This is everything from encouraging secure by design and secure by default practices, pushing more vulnerability, liability onto the actual software providers themselves, but also encouraging businesses to see that secure by design and secure by default is a competitive advantage, particularly when working with community organizations. Community organizations may be more likely to go with a particular vendor if they believe that a vendor has secure by design products. And so we believe that's one way. The second is venture capital should continue to invest in products and technologies that simplify cybersecurity and automate a lot of these tools for community organizations, because most community organizations do not have the time or expertise to execute these controls by themselves. And if an MSP or an MSSP is out of reach for them, they're out of luck. So that's the first recommendation. The second is that states have a role to play here, particularly when it comes to pooling services. So right now, like I mentioned, it's very difficult for a lot of organizations to be able to contract with MSPs and MSSPs. And so we've seen other successful models of these shared pooled services. The UN has one for their international computing program, and they provide shared services at cost for all UN affiliates. And we believe that states particularly should be doing this for utilities that are important for critical infrastructure. So water utilities, electric utilities, other things where it's important to have a high level of functioning and to be able to provide these at cost. And finally, we need to embed cyber knowledge in our communities, right? And this is done in two-pronged ways. The first is that we're finding boots on the ground. It is incredibly hard to educate the general public about cybersecurity principles, right? And continue to upskill as security evolves. And so we've found that the most effective way to do this is through trusted community messengers. So a lot of these community organizations already work with other organizations that they trust, whether that be their local credit union, their business association. And so we want to tap into those networks of people to help be catalysts for this culture of cybersecurity. But second to that, we also need to start early, right? If we start embedding cybersecurity principles and skills in the school system, we will end up with a population that has at least a base level of cybersecurity fundamentals that then will translate into the community organization workforce. And so this is a much longer term goal, but we believe that this should be the way that we're moving, in a similar way that going and doing typing classes in school was important, right? How do we teach students basics of cybersecurity and security thoughts, mindsets? So, right, key takeaways from this are that cyber volunteering programs are doing a lot of good. They're helping catch organizations that are falling beneath the cyber poverty line. But there's still a lot of work to be done to scale them and make them more effective. And they're not enough. We need more long-term effective solutions. So how can you help be part of the solution, right? I have a few recommendations. The first is to read our roadmap. It's linked up here on the slide. We go into a lot more depth about the actual ins and outs of how to execute these recommendations, but we also map the different cyber volunteering groups, and we also quantify the risk to these organizations. But at the very end of this roadmap report, you can find a state guidebook, which is essentially a clearinghouse of actions that states can take to help build this local ecosystem of support. And in it, we outline the different types of cyber volunteering programs, how they weave together, and how you can set them up. We even link to model bills that states can use to establish their own state civilian cyber corps. We also outline effective funding strategies for local education initiatives, and we also outline different ways that private sector companies can help partner with nonprofits to set up private volunteering programs. But the most helpful thing that you all can do is to go back to your policymakers and help start up more of these state-run and state-endorsed volunteering programs. We just need more boots on the ground. We need more students at universities offering services. We need more volunteers on the state level who are able to come in, particularly in local and rural locations, to help boots on the ground organizations. And so please go knock on your policymaker's door and tell them about the amazing work that these types of volunteering organizations are doing. And of course, join us on our platform. We have it's cybervolunteers.us. And check us out. We're doing a main stage talk at DEF CON at 10 a.m. on Sunday, where we're going to outline the different types of volunteering groups in much more depth, share some more stories from boots on the ground, and also tell you a little bit more about the current volunteer distribution networks. And you can reach out to me here, and I'm going to open the floor up for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. That was a lot of words in 20 minutes. That was fabulous. So, if you've got questions, come on around here and ask them, please. Here we go.
Grace, I've known you for a while, kind of indirectly. So I started off a community college student, right? And I'm pretty much self-taught cyber. I attended George Washington University, thanks to programs like Women in Cybersecurity. And during my time at George Washington University, I started Women in Cybersecurity at GW. It was the most popular cyber club in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, and we helped George Mason and Georgetown start their Women in Cyber clubs, right? So these little seeds that you're talking about, I've seen it in real time because it helped me grow as a person. And then from there, I had my internship at Intel Corporation in Government Affairs, met I Am the Cavalry through some pretty cool people, did Hackers on the Hill, and then full circle, right? Now I'm a community college professor after being doged. But the good news is I joined one of the best, community college districts in California, the North Orange County Community College District. And so now that I'm kind of like full circle, the wheels are spinning, right? Like it's turning, right? We have a community college cyber center, and it's actually doing well, but I think it could like go up a notch. And my dean is also into cyber policies, getting his PhD at UCLA in policies. And so I'm kind of like wondering, for community college professors, how do we take what's pre-existing and take it up a notch, right? Because I've been there. A lot of us in this room have been there before in their own journey. So like, how can we kind of like level up? And I know the work CLTC is doing. I mean, I've followed them throughout grad school. So yeah, I'm here to pick your brain.
Yeah, are you asking how we can scale up the existing volunteering organizations at the community colleges?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So there's amazing resources out there. If the community college is not already a part of the consortium of cybersecurity clinics, I highly encourage the community college to check out the consortium website. There's a series of different resources that are available to everybody, right, to use to set up and mature different cybersecurity clinics. But I also think, right, we've found that clinics benefit the most when they are in direct contact with other clinics and other places to share knowledge and to also just kind of point out potential pitfalls that you may have in the first year or 2 years in setting up. But I think that what we're seeing is that there are a couple of challenges, right? Like getting buy-in from the admin of a particular university can be hard. And so increasing funding for that is really important. But I think that the best recommendation that I'd give to a community college hoping to scale their service offerings would be to find another community college or university that's doing similar work and partner with them to sort of tag team the problem and see where you can learn from each other. We're finding amazing success with that at the Consortium of Cybersecurity Clinics. And if you're interested, I can give you a list of different people from the consortium that I think could potentially be a good fits for your university.
Dope. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
Hi, Grace. Thank you so much. Longtime fan. I'm curious as to whether you could talk more about the liability side.
Yeah.
is it for hackers specifically looking to do this sort of work, is it a lack of resourcing, like the volunteering corps doesn't necessarily have a series of template contracts or waivers, or is it that the companies or public sector or SLTT organizations are unwilling to sign such things?
This is a great question, an incredibly complicated question as well. So there are a couple of things happening here, right? The different governance structures of these different types of cyber volunteering groups have different built-in thresholds for liability built into them, right? So if you're a state civilian cyber corps and you're a volunteer that is volunteering for a state civilian cyber corps, you are protected at a base level from liability more than you would be from a different organization, just by the virtue of the fact that you're working for the state. And so when folks are going in on the state level and doing some of this incident response work, they have much more peace of mind. That being said, other nonprofit volunteering groups have developed really great templates, like you mentioned, that they're using. So the Cyber Peace Builders that the Cyber Peace Institute is running has a really, really great template that they've been using and has put the confidence of a lot of really big private sector companies to ease. And so they've actually volunteered a bunch of their own cybersecurity analysts to go and do this work through Cyber Peace Builders. And so I think the problem is, I think there's promising solutions to the problem, but the problem is that all of these programs are set up differently and have different needs. And so you essentially need different customizable templates for every different type of program based off of the governance structure. And on top of that, some volunteers, depending on who their employer are, might have different needs on liability. And so having customizable templates and also the help of pro bono legal services is huge. So one of the things that we're hoping to do in the next phase of CRC potentially is to explore partnerships for cyber volunteering programs with legal clinics across the US to help essentially provide some of these free services to volunteers and to the volunteering programs themselves to help bridge that gap and increase the number of volunteers that can be scaled.
Awesome, thank you.
Thanks, Vanona. Okay.
Last chance for questions. Any more questions? Oh, Mr. Ray has a very important question. We do not want to miss this.
I just want to foot stomp what Grace is doing. I was the leader of one of these state-sponsored civilian organizations for about 6 years, and we learned a lot of lessons. We ran into some roadblocks, and those roadblocks are what the Cyber Resilience Corps is going to try to take into account and teach you how to solve. So if you are in any way thinking of doing something like this, now is the time. There's people that have the arrows in their backs and the blood. So we're around. If you need advice of what to avoid, come talk to us. We have Michigan had legislation that you can copy. Texas did. So we're around.
Yes, thank you so much, Ray. Thank you so much, Ray. Yeah, to foot stomp that. Community cybersecurity is national security. So yeah, please get involved, and thank you all so much.
That was amazing. Just show of hands, how many of y'all do volunteer? Or how many of y'all in the community? Oh, we gotta get that number up. Come on, come on. Thank you. I feel like I should have been here my whole life. David, Josh, thank you. I believe most of you have just stayed the whole time, which is awesome. But housekeeping. Thank you to all of our sponsors. Without you, we'd have no money. Not just sponsors, you all lovely people being here, and our volunteers. What's up, girl? How you doing? Thank you, Adobe, Akita. Profit Run Zero. Drop Zone. The Yeti was out yesterday. Please silence your... Where are you guys going? You'll come back, come back. Please silence your phones. Let's be respectful for our next speaker, who's going to be equally awesome. We will take questions at the end. This is a 30-minute talk as well. So you know the drill, line up. I believe those are all the housekeeping. You ready, sir?
Ma'am, I am definitely ready.
You are so ready.
So ready. Good morning, Las Vegas. Woo! Okay, let's give it up for our next speaker, Mr. It was me. I'm your next speaker. Very self-referential. Okay, so others have done this, so I am going to do this as well. The views expressed by me today do not represent those of my employer, the federal government, Clark County, or the state of Nevada. They represent my views. If you hate what I have to say, you should tell me, but if you love it, you should tell Mr. Josh Corman that you love it. There will definitely be time for questions, so as you think of them, please jot them down and save them for the end. And I want to just start by saying this session is really, I would call it a thought experiment. And the question that we pose for you today is, could you, or how could you, your family, and your neighborhood support themselves survive without external help for 30 days? That is what the question is today. All right, here is our agenda. Please look at it on the screen. I'm not going to read it to you because reading is boring and people don't like to be bored, especially in Las Vegas on a Wednesday morning. But this is where we're going. So this is where I tell you what I'm going to tell you. Only it's on the screen. You can read it. But this is what we're going to talk about today. And now I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you. Join with me, will you, as we start story time. Once upon a time, there was an old man who used to go to the ocean to do his writing. He had a habit of walking on the beach every morning before he began his work. Early one morning, he was walking along the shore after a big storm had passed and found the vast beach littered with starfish as far as the eye could see, stretching in both directions. Off in the distance, the old man noticed a small girl approaching. As the girl walked, she paused every so often, and as she grew closer, the man could see she was occasionally bending down to pick up an object and throw it into the sea. The girl came closer still, and the old man called out, "Good morning. May I ask what it is that you are doing?" The young girl paused, looked up, and replied, "Throwing starfish into the ocean. The tide has washed them up onto the beach, and they can't return to the sea by themselves," she replied. "When the sun gets high, they will die unless I throw them back into the water." The old man replied, "But there must be tens of thousands of starfish on this beach. I'm afraid you won't really be able to make much of a difference." The girl bent down, picked up yet another starfish, and threw it as far as she could into the ocean. Then she turned, smiled, and said, "It made a difference to that one." So that is how we are starting our discussion this morning. Making a difference, even a difference for one person, is still a difference. So I showed you what we're going to talk about. I want to talk for a minute, just a brief minute, about what we're not going to talk about, because sometimes it's useful to compare and contrast. We are not going to talk about this. Today we're going to talk about neighborhood and household resilience. We are not going to talk about full-on prepping. If you're a prepper, I do not mean to be offensive. Okay, but this is not what this is. We're not talking about prepping. I recently heard, like yesterday, about a person talking about prepping culture, and he said that anyone with less than 6 months of supplies is not being serious. Well, We're not going to do that here. We're not going to talk about ammo and guns and 1,000 other things. We will take questions at the end. So, oh yeah, take all the photos you want, especially of the slides. All of the slides were created by environmentally dangerous AI, just so we know. So there's no copyright issues. It's just AI destroying the environment that was used to create our slides today. Also, I didn't pay any actors or models because the budget was low. So we're not going to talk about this. We're also not going to talk about this. We're not going to talk about billionaires who, rather than spending a little tiny bit of their money to solve or address societal problems, have decided to rather protect them own selves by digging holes into the ground, spending multiple millions of dollars to protect themselves and their families without nary a care for anybody in this room. We're not going to talk about them. I would suggest that this is not the approach for long-term sustainability. This message brought to you by the Times of India, August 3rd. So this is a very recent story. Feel free to read about it later, at noon or after that. Okay. So but we want to talk about this. This is the thing that we want to talk about. The first step might seem the easiest. It might even seem silly. But many of us we don't know our neighbors. People move in and out all the time. Sometimes we are satisfied literally not knowing the person who's next to us, or across the street, or down the street, or the apartment next to us, or the flat at the end of the hallway. I don't want to just propagate cultural stereotypes. So I'll just talk about me. I'm not talking about you, I'm just talking about me. It might be hard for me to get out of my comfort zone to actually leave my house, walk across the street and talk to somebody else. Leave my apartment, walk across the hallway and talk to somebody else. There is this typecast of, nerds being very insular and talking to their computers and not talking to humans. I'm sure that's not the case in this room. But for me, this can be a little bit of a challenge to break out of my shell. It's all right. The reason why it's important is that this is about humanity and being a good human. It's about helping others, not just yourself, and being able to bring comfort and relief. Our discussion today is really going to focus on low-tech, low-tech and no-tech approaches. It's going to be about breaking out of our comfort zone. And fundamentally, this is about being the cavalry. Let us presume for a second that no one is coming to help. No one is coming. So if no one is coming, who's going to do anything? Well, I can do something. You can do something. I am the cavalry. You are the cavalry. That is why we're here. All right. Another statement. I do not know about you. I don't have any idea about you. I don't know where you live. I don't know your geography. I don't know your finances. I don't know if you're in a high-density housing, low-density, if you're out in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of 10 million people. I have no idea what it is that's going on with you. So let me put forth a challenge for you to listen to my words, think about what I'm saying, and apply the lessons that are relevant, that are germane, and make sense to you in your situation. a lot of this is going to be a choose your own adventure. Really, where I'm asking you to take the parts that I share that make sense to you and then do something with it. We're going to have a slide later that reviews all of our homework assignments. Because this is an I Am the Cavalry presentation, there will be homework. You will be graded. Anything that's talked about in this presentation will be on the test. So, that's all right, no pressure. I want to set expectations. All right, let us dive in. Who are the people in your neighborhood? Who are the people that you meet each day? Who are the people as you're walking down the street? They are the people in your neighborhood. I searched for a long time for that clip from Mr. Rogers, and I could not find it. The good people at Pennsylvania must be very, very well trained on their intellectual property protection, because I could not find that song and it made me crazy. That's okay. But who are the people in your neighborhood? Maybe there is somebody in your neighborhood who could use a helping hand. Maybe you've got somebody who's elderly in your neighborhood. Maybe there's somebody who's disabled, somebody who is hard of hearing, somebody who is mobility challenged, somebody who is language challenged. English is not their first language. It might not be their second or third or fourth. Somebody who is transportation challenged. They do not have a vehicle for whatever reason, which is unfortunately the case in many American cities. Public transportation is not an option because, for reasons that I do not understand, investing in such things have not been deemed efficient. They might need oxygen. They might have other medical needs that, you know what, you cannot see because they are not externally presented. Here's another one. They might be single, they might be a single parent. They might be a parent with a child or more than one child with special needs. These are the people in your neighborhood. How would you know? Well, you might know by talking to them and learning what is their situation. Being a human to those of you who are around. Now, this is not all bad news, because there's also people, some of the same people that I just mentioned, that are also, they know about construction. They are plumbers. They are tradespeople. They are electricians. They might be a physician. They might be a nurse. They might be a teacher. They might be able to fix cars. They might be a tinkerer. They might be a ham radio operator. Very interesting. I forget the quote, I'm a multitude. All of us bring a lot to the table. And we can find out what is going on by talking to each other, by being actually part of a community. What is going on in your neighborhood? I do not know, but you have an opportunity to understand what is happening in your neighborhood. What makes it special? What risks are present? Is your neighborhood at risk of wildfires? And after reading about wildfires in the boroughs of New York, for God's sake, almost every neighborhood, frankly, today, almost every neighborhood is at some risk of wildfire, which seems crazy to me. Is your neighborhood on a floodplain? Is your neighborhood in or adjacent to evacuation routes for things like hurricanes? Maybe. Is your neighborhood specially situated as it relates to crime? Are there other environmental threats within your neighborhood? Do you know? If you do not know, or maybe you think you know, here's some homework. reach out to your local community and state officials for information on this question. What are the risks that are present in this neighborhood? Create a checklist of these risks. Prioritize the hazards that pose the highest risk. Can you reduce the risk to your family, your community, your neighbors? What is the time horizon that you have to reduce these risks? Does your school have an emergency plan? Does your employer? Has the plan been tested? Because having a plan is one thing, but if that plan is not exercised, it may not be as valuable as if it was actually used or exercised. What is the one thing that you can do, that your neighbors can do working together to mitigate some of this risk? Your neighborhood. Now let us talk about your household. Maybe your house looks like this. Maybe your house is an apartment. Maybe your house is something entirely different. I encourage you to think about these questions. 30 days. What would it take for you to be able to survive without external assistance for 30 days? I would like you to think about this one step at a time and not to be overwhelmed, because it's very easy. I will tell you, you turn on the news, oh my God, it is very easy to be overwhelmed. But here's the good news. You do not have to be overwhelmed. You can take one step to help protect your household. You can take 1 or 2 steps this month to protect your household. And then next month, guess what? You take a couple of steps. Do you solve everything in one day or 1 week? No. Please don't do that. Because you will make yourself and your significant others, maybe your children, maybe your neighbors, you'll make them all crazy if you try and do this in one day. So don't do this in one day. Don't do it in 1 week. Don't do it in 1 month. Make a project plan. Consider 18 months. In 18 months, I want to be here. Define what here is. I've got some ideas about what here, the definition of here is. And then you just take simple steps toward the objective. Dave, why are you getting us all worked up and talking about this? Why are you doing this? Well, we've heard already over the last 2.5 days about things like Taiwan 2027. But maybe it's not 2027, maybe it's 2030. I don't know. Maybe having some household resilience would be really nice in the event of other hazards or events. Maybe pandemics. That could never happen. There's no way. There's no way we could ever have a pandemic. Or maybe there is. As you think about your household, please, and this is the goal, think about your neighborhood. Because we should be thinking about others as we think about ourselves. Think about your space storage limitations. Think about rotation. And etc. So now we're going to get into the details. Where to start? You start with some no regrets items. No regrets or no regrets. However you want to do this. Get yourself some plastic bins and start to collect the following items, which might be very handy to have. Markers, pens, pencils, notebooks, index cards, batteries. I would tell you, batteries are awesome. Many of them can last for years if left unopened and stored properly. What are some other no regrets things? Toilet paper, paper towels, disposable paper plates, disposable utensils, forks, knives, spoons. Bleach. Unscented bleach, liquid soap, liquid hand sanitizer, other cleaning supplies, X-Acto knives, kitchen knives, can openers. I cannot tell you how important this is. Can openers, not just one, but more than one. We're thinking of our neighbors. basic tools, a hammer, a saw, screwdrivers, a crescent wrench, a socket set. Cash is good. Small bills, not Fort Knox. Don't go nuts with this. But you know what? Having a little bit of money in 10s and 20s can be very helpful. Blank notebooks. Medicine. Medicine is very important. For some of us, medicine is critically important in the sense that we will die in some number of days if we don't have medicine. So we should think about medicine. Kids stuff, hygiene products, tampons, pads, diapers, catheters, flashlights with batteries, flashlights that are known to work, string, twine, fishing tape, gloves, PPE, eyedroppers, matches, waterproof is even better, toothbrushes, extra for your neighbors, toothpaste, floss, basic medical supplies, bandages, tourniquets, rubbing alcohol, topical antibiotics like Neosporin. As we're thinking about these no regrets items, also think, where are your vital records? Insurance cards, passport, driver's license, birth, marriage certificates, social security card, pet ID, and pet vaccination records. Think about those. Now, this is a big one, water. What do you do about the water? What do you need? An adult human generally needs 1 gallon per day, unless you live in Las Vegas or Phoenix, Arizona, where you definitely need more than 1 gallon to live. So where do you start? You can start the commercial route. You go to a camping store and buy one of these big old blue things. You wash it out with dish soap, and then you put tap water into it. Cool. You can buy commercial water. You know, it's fit for purpose. That's great. You can use 2-liter soda containers. You clean them out. You clean them out with soap, and for the liters, you put in, let's see, you add a little bit of bleach, or I'm sorry, a little bit of chlorine to like a drop per liter. So you can build reasonably a water supply that is low budget, very doable. There are options for water treatment if you can't get it ahead of time. This includes boiling, chlorination, and distillation. There are options. If you're dealing with an untrusted water source, the best option, I'm told, is boiling. But there are other options, including chlorination and distillation. In addition, there are other options, including life straws and alternatives to life straws. Because if you look at the life straw on the very edge, probably every time you want a drink of water, you don't want to grab a life straw, lay on your belly next to a water source and drink. Because that'll get old after about the first time you do it. So there are other ways that you can approach this issue. Take a look at the commercial options that are available and make informed decisions about what makes sense for your budget. Shelf-stable, low-prep food. I am not recommending that you run out and you invest tens and thousands of dollars into MREs. That is not my suggestion. I am suggesting that you think about shelf-stable, low-prep food that you can use. Salt-free crackers, whole grain cereals, peanut butter, canned tuna, other canned meat, canned food with high liquid content. Choose items that do not require refrigeration or special preparation. Consider the special needs of the household, allergies, etc. Also, can openers. You think about your food and your water storage. You want to store the stuff into a cool, dry place. You want to store your food in containers that will resist local vermin, because if they find it, they will help themselves and you'll have a bunch of nothing. So They don't care about your water, but they do care about your rice and your other food. So metal or glass containers for those objects is good. Mice can eat through plastic, no problem. So keep that in mind. Rotate your food. Rotate it. You can actually eat the oldest stuff and store the newest stuff. I'll mention to you, we're not going to go into it, the list. These are the top 10 vegetables that you might consider growing within a Victory garden because they're easy, they're low impact, and this is a thing you can start on now, either your Victory or community gardens. Okay, assignment time. This is your homework. You are leaving with homework, and this is going to be on the test. What is going on in your neighborhood? What are the risks? What are the things that you can do to ameliorate the risks? What is your neighborhood risk profile, and who are your neighbors? Think about signing up for a Red Cross first aid class so that you can be a part of the solution and not only being a part of the problem. Think about your supply reservoir and think about your neighbors and think about your elderly neighbor next door to you who may not have the means or the information for their supply. I want to give you a URL where you can do more reading on your own. If you trust me, if you don't trust me, don't look at this QR code. If you do trust me, go ahead and use this QR code. These are from the good people at Utah, put together a series, a large, long series of all kinds of videos, most of which are helpful, but this is for reading afterwards. And now we have a few minutes for questions. And that mic might need to be turned on because I think it's currently off. And the on switch is at the bottom.
Well, I feel better that Jess had trouble with that. So my question has to do with the reality of people with lower incomes being able to do this.
Yes.
I'm a community college teacher. When I talk about disaster recovery from a computer sense, I'm like, how many of you are ready for this? And of course, when students are dealing with housing uncertainty and all those other challenges, the idea of, oh, and be ready for 30 days, so how do we address that inequality where people are just trying to survive and we want you to be able to be on your own for 30 days?
It's a great question. I think the answer probably needs to happen within a community to think about our neighbors who maybe they're unhoused, etc. I don't have all the answers, but we have to work with our communities to start to drive toward answers to deal with the have-nots.
Okay, this was for a tall person. Okay. Hey, so I have an answer to that. First, I'll say I was an emergency manager, so I don't mean to offend any of my other emergency managers, but the focus on gathering stuff instead of doing stuff is the thing that alienates the people who don't have. They have more than they think, but we have to reframe that message. And we did that in my community. I can talk about that later, but here's some things to help you cheat on your homework that Dave just gave you. If you Google for a program called Map Your Neighborhood, that was created in my state, Washington. It's no longer supported, but the info is good. So if you don't know how to have conversations with your neighbors, it tells you how to sit down and have the conversation with your neighbors, focusing on not the gathering of things, but on the inventorying of skills and the inventorying of needs of your community, your neighborhood, as it were. The other thing I'll throw out there is community emergency response teams. Lots of communities have those. They give you basic disaster skills. And every state and nearly every county in the country has what's called a hazard mitigation plan, which lists all the bad shit that can happen in your community. So find those.
Oh.
Mic dropped itself, but it survived. Anyway, that's how to help you with your homework that Dave gave you. There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. A big round of applause for our previous speaker. Yay! So next up, Mr. Josh is going to bring us home. Josh.
Thank you. All right. Give yourself a round of applause for most of 2.5 days of content. All right, so I'm going to try. The schedule is wrong. We don't want to make you late for upstairs, so the Hacker Tracker kept changing our time block. Theoretically, I have an hour. I'm not going to take an hour. I'm going to try to get our exposition and discussion and synthesis of the 2.5 days of amazing content to give you 15 minutes to get upstairs. So I'll happily talk to anybody beyond that, but we're going to try to keep this shorter than is advertised. Okay, so I'm Josh Corman. I founded I Am the Cavalry in this track. We launched 12 years ago on August 1st. How many of you were here for the opening on Monday morning? Some people were traveling. Okay, for those who were not here, I'm going to quickly play the two-minute videos that we did during the first year pilot of Undisruptible 27. Undisruptible 27 is very similar to the Cavalry, but it's a funded project, initially 1-year pilot from July to July, from Craig Newmark of Craigslist at the Institute for Security and Technology, a 501c3 nonprofit educational institution bridging Silicon Valley to national security things. So I have been designing and driving the pilot to see if there's any there, and the good news is there is. We just got, well, we'll get into some of the details, but we secured a lot of funding. So if you saw the opening, we talked about the hypothesis and theory of change for the 1-year pilot, and I'm going to give a tiny amount of refresher in case you missed it, but most of this is going to be doing two things. Explaining what the next 2 years of funded work is going to look like and the role that you can play in that, small, medium, or large, and try to synthesize the incredible insights we unearthed across our great speakers on Monday, Tuesday, and today. So let me jump to the videos in case you're wondering why the hell are we talking about 2027 so much. So here is video 1. How many of you have been to a hospital in the last 12 months? How many of you think you might need a hospital in the next 12 months? Okay. Okay, here we go. First one.
Picture a hospital. Picture your hospital. When was the last time you were there? Was it to welcome a baby into the world or to say goodbye to a loved one? No one wants to need a hospital, but when we do, we depend on timely access to care, when and where we need it. Irrespective of cause, delayed and degraded care for time-sensitive conditions can affect worsened outcomes and even loss of life. A 5-minute longer ambulance ride has a significant impact on 30-day mortality rates. Time is brain, where even an hour or few could determine if you walk again, if you talk again, if you even survive. Now picture your hospital. What if that hospital was not available to you? If your hospital was disrupted, where would you go instead? Is it across town? More than an hour away? What if they are also down? The chance is not as remote as you'd hope. Hospitals have become a top target of ransomware, cyber attacks that cripple technologies in the vital path of care delivery. Worse, your hospital doesn't even need to be the one attacked to endanger you or your family. We've seen a 10-fold decrease in favorable outcomes for heart patients merely due to excess strains of a ransomware-affected region. Now back to your hospital, back to your family. You and your family deserve better. If we want timely access to patient care and more resilience in the face of accidents and adversaries, we're going to need to advocate for ourselves, now. As we head into an era of hybrid conflict with threats to water and power, these disruptions stand to get a lot worse, but we'll talk about that in another video.
Okay, so some of you have seen that once. Some of you have seen that 2 or 3 times now. If you were lucky enough to see Christian Emeth yesterday, some of those studies were peer-reviewed studies by him and his team at UCSD and elsewhere. These are drafts. These were drafts done with our limited pilot budget to see can we use creative arts and storytelling to meet people where they are, use their love language, avoid cyber jargon, and try to communicate that these are not merely HIPAA violations. These are public safety, human life consequences. Now, did you see, how many raised your hand, I think from Grace's talk, saw that the St. Paul, Minnesota has been ransomed? last week, right? I don't know what the current state of that is, if it's back up yet. How many of you seen a news telecast from a big hospital saying we've been ransomed, and they give their press statement? Okay, what they'll typically say is something like, in an abundance of caution, and in accordance with industry best practices, we have chosen to shut down operations to contain the breach, to protect your privacy. So I hate this statement, and it is the muscle memory reflexive statement. And the reason I hate this statement is the horses have left the barn for your data. The access necessary to encrypt that data and ransom you was sufficient to make a copy and exfiltrate it, and they often do. Moreover, most of you have lost your your healthcare data plural times, and you don't get a new history. So I'm not indifferent to privacy, but what we did on top of that spilt milk is we self-inflicted a denial of patient care where minutes or hours are the difference between life and death. And depending on how long you self-impose that denial of service, your cash flow could run out and you could close your hospital forever, which has happened 1,000 times of the 7,000 hospitals we had in 2015. And I think Christian showed a graphic of 700 at extreme risk of financial instability to close in the next 12 months. That's independent of cyber, but accelerated by cyber. Okay, so some people, this is where audience participation with hands and comments is encouraged as we round this out. Some people told me this video is too scary, it's too much FUD. Some Congress people we talked to on both sides of the aisle said it's not scary enough. Some people said, who's this for, right? And we're gonna have lots of stakeholders. So that was a really effective one for medical professionals, because then at the end of it, we get to say HIPAA kills people. So if I had to describe what's the summary of this, it's that irrespective of cause, there's a time-space risk for a denial of patient care and a location. And if you don't know your next proximal alternative care, if it's not reasonably close to you, we are advocating for the wrong things. It's not about your HIPAA, it's about your life, right? That's in peacetime. Can I play the second one, which is, who thinks this is too scary? It's okay, you're not gonna hurt my feelings. Nobody thinks it's too scary? We hate FUD. I hate FUD. It's not, yeah. So some people think it should be more scary. Now, here's my attitude on this, and I said it last year, I'm gonna say it once more, because I don't know if you were all here. We have to walk like the edge of a knife. We have to be forthright. When there's a hurricane coming, FEMA and national security and public safety people do not say, well, the person in Panhandle, Florida can't do anything to stop the hurricane. Let's not bother telling them, right? It is scary, it's gonna do harm. You can't just like infantilize them and leave them out of the equation. They're a stakeholder in harm's way. So what do? I think the more consequential something is, the more forthright we have to be. You cannot exaggerate it, and you cannot downplay it. You gotta be honest. Tell them what you know, tell them what you don't know. Answer questions, yeah.
The thing that I did not get is, the thing that I didn't get from the first video was that it could happen.
I'm getting there.
The point that I got was, you should have a backup plan, but we should all have backup plans for everything.
Yeah, yeah.
If my vet closes, I'm gonna need a backup plan
Yeah.
for my dog. So
Okay.
that's what I did.
Yeah, the other thing is we don't believe any single video is gonna work. The original thought was we're probably gonna have 3 videos, 2 minutes or less each, per stakeholder type, and they may not have the same nouns and verbs. So the types of stakeholders we're looking at is owners and operators of water or power or hospitals, local leadership like a city planner, town selectman, CIO for the city, helpful hackers. How do we help the helpers be helpful, like you? Ultimately, everyday Americans, but not yet. Way too premature for that, even though we're running out of time. And probably some state level emergency management type people and public policy people. So we're gonna have maybe 2 dozen, 3 dozen of these things, and they're gonna have to be attenuated to the risk appetite. And they might have to start like boiling the frog. Less scary, a little bit scarier, and then much more motivating. But let me play video number 2, which was the first one we started with. So that was a peacetime truth that you are already suffering from severely diminished patient care right now, just due to the state of healthcare and Late stage capitalism. But here we go. Ready?
We are too dependent on undependable technology. The systems that we rely on every day for everything from water to food to power and emergency medical care are subject to escalating harms by accidents, bad actors, and nation-state adversaries. These attacks could quickly move from disruption to destruction. For example, an intentional water hammer that abruptly stops or reverses water flow, sending a shockwave through the system. Attacks on our water systems would be devastating, not just for lack of access at home. No water means no coffee, no toilets, no laundry. No water also means no hydrants to put out fires. No water means no healthcare. A hospital can't run without clean water. No water means no sterilization, no surgery scrubbing, no laboratories, and eventually, no access to life-saving care. Our dependence on connected tech has grown faster than our ability to secure it, and there is evidence that foreign actors are already weaponizing these vulnerabilities. But who would actually do this? In public hearings, Congress and U.S. government cybersecurity leaders have warned the public of Volt Typhoon, an ongoing campaign of successful attacks on U.S. water facilities, led by a People's Republic of China state-sponsored cyber actor. But China is not the only aggressor. We've seen cyber attacks on our water systems from Russia and Iran. These attacks pose a broad and unrelenting risk to critical water infrastructure and could escalate to large-scale destructive attacks on our water systems as early as 2027. The good news is we have time to make changes. We must strive to make our lifeline basic human needs undisruptible, and where we cannot, ensure that our communities are more resilient under fire. This means divesting our reliance on connected technology, better securing our existing systems where we cannot disconnect, and ensuring analog solutions are in place when those systems fail. If this sounds overwhelming, remember, if you can't afford to protect it, you can't afford to connect it. Undisruptible 27 will prioritize the safety, security, and resilience of 3 lifeline basic human needs, especially at the local level.
Okay, that's video number 2. This is what our theory of change was hinting at for the first year. We have to blow up and start over our theory of change, but I'll get to that in a minute. Any hot takes, reactions to what you just saw? Like it, don't like it, more of this, less of that, you in the back, and I'll repeat it for the camera. Yeah. Okay, a couple things. To repeat that for the camera and people who couldn't hear, like the water focus, especially given what happened in LA. Water was a big problem, both for putting out fires, although mostly that's not how we put out fires, but and people who needed water. I knew that water would be a weak link in the chain. It is absolutely the weakest link in the chain, but we've come to realize, and I'm going to show a little bit more how we've changed our theory of change. This video was made mostly by building trust and empathy, meeting water engineers where they are, partly like people like Dean Ford, who presented here the last 2 years and attended the third year before it. You saw yesterday with Andrew and Ginger. Like, we really tried to meet them on their turf, have them teach us what's the worst that could happen. I didn't know what a water hammer is, but now I do. And it's not the only thing they're concerned about. It's just one that around which we can tell a really compelling story. It's just a property of physics that can happen with the access that Volt Typhoon already has, could do significant damage for water mains and the like, and would be motivating. And if there's reasonable mitigations to that particular storyline, and maybe others similar to it, then we can say something scary combined with something actionable and tangible and realistic. Not cyber up, but engineer down some consequences, really common sense and familiar things. So this was not for you per se, this was for the water engineers, but we're gonna have to make permutations and flavors of this. Blake.
Yeah, so one key element that we need to remove from this video is time to prepare. That has not been shown to be linked with a preparedness activity. But to build on what you're talking about is the ability to prepare. Like, we're showing the risk, and then let's go to that solution-oriented approach where we're talking about, like, okay, let's Let's talk about some solutions like the Idaho National Labs with the consequence-informed engineering or other stuff like that. That'll help our water utilities. They see the risk. You're explaining, honestly, the explanation of the risk is incredibly strong. The next part is,
Yep.
okay, what's next?
Yep.
What do I do now? And then you don't have time to prepare. We gotta just remove that entirely. Not to scare the bejesus out of these people, but like that allows, oh, well, I can do that manana.
Yeah, there's a lot of changes we had to make. So when we did this, it was on the cheap with initially some pro bono work. We eventually signed a statement of work with them with the table scraps we had left from year one. We did just get a big surge of support from Craig for the next 2 years, which I'm going to talk about right after this question. Okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to follow up on my comments on the previous one. The thing that I felt was missing was exactly the first thing I saw in the second
Yes.
one, which was, and it's the first thing you say here, we're too dependent on undependable things.
Yep.
So that's,
Yeah, so I mean, if you can remember what he said the first time and the second time, the reason we started with this second video, and what we found is no one found it personal, and the attention span is too low to say everything in one video, although we're about to try, but it's not going to work, I don't think. So what we ended up doing is saying, okay, what's something that I can relate to, whether it's just normal ransomware or just normal, the hospital closed because we ran out of money. That's acute. We already have 7,000, 6,000, and then ransom's making it worse. Well, what if water disruptions could just be the knockout blow? And what if it's not just yours, you'll get ransomed. You can drive an hour away. What if an hour away is down because of the same water hammer or something else, okay? So this is going to get very nasty very quick if it happens. And we have bipartisan agreement on that. We have White House agreement on that. We have Department of Defense agreement on that. Somebody sort of outed, maybe suggesting that he saw some DoD slides that took stuff from ours. So no one's disagreeing that Xi Jinping has said he wants the PLA, the army, to be ready to take Taiwan as early as 2027. What we're debating is will it be 2027, 28, 29, 30, mid-30s? No one's debating he said he's going to do it. No one's debating that he said, or they said, if the U.S. interferes, they will retaliate. And one of the retaliation pre-positioning is Volt Typhoon. You probably heard of Salt Typhoon more, which is espionage and spycraft, and considered fair play for spycraft. An army putting digital remote detonation charges in civilian infrastructure like water is outrageous. So have they hit the button yet? And the one thing I'm going to change in that video for sure is they have not had successful attacks. They have had successful compromises. The attack would involve a consequence. So I don't like the sword of Damocles over every one of our water facilities' heads. I don't like it, and you shouldn't like it either. And we should not persist at the appetite of our adversaries. And by the way, they said, if you interfere with Taiwan, we're going to bring chaos. The other part is we have to interfere. So I'm going to go fast through a couple slides, and then we'll get some more discussion. Okay. It's not going to be easy, and there's not, in tone challenges, we might have to make a super scary version and a less scary version, and we're going to have to figure that out, but I want your help. This is an invitation to get in the Slack and help. Okay. I've been saying some variation of this since we launched the Cavalry 12 years ago. But it's really about overdependence on undependable things, and we should right-size how much dependence we are to how dependable it is and to consequences. And that's not what we do. We put 15 gallons of shit in a 5-pound sack. In normal engineering, we would never do this. You know, you have to rate the bridge for the load that's going to go across the bridge. You're going to rate the skyscraper, how many floors it has, maximum occupancy. Like we've thrown caution on the wind under our digital infrastructure. It needs to look a lot more reliable, like steel and concrete. So this is a slightly modified version of an internal doc I gave to tell the think tank what we did. So in the pilot year, some success factors were empathy, 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 which is the heart of the Cavalry from day one. You know, coming out of the grief from my mother's death, I realized my woundedness was not a liability. It was enabling authentic human connection I had never encountered before. So we had to find a way to build empathy muscles. It's not like you have it or you don't have it. It's a muscle, and we were puny weaklings on empathy. So now we're like big, strong empathy people in this room, okay? And that muscle gets stronger with effort. We had to make stakeholder-specific love language. This was more about storytelling than anything else. We had always in the Cavalry said be patiently impatient. The real challenge this time is it might be urgent and a year and a half left for what we know, but the person we're talking to heard it for the very first time today. So you gotta have a way to get them on board before you overwhelm them. So it's a lot by feel. I'm not gonna read every single thing on here, but we had like an hour conversation on just this slide alone. I've kept some deliberate imperfection. One of those bullets there I will touch on. People that feel like they've contributed to something, not only is it expensive to get re-edits every single time, so I'm gonna batch them, but it's also, the more people we hear, the more nuance we get, the better the story gets, the better the script gets. But also, like someone says, I helped with that video, right? You get a shared sense of ownership. If we tried to make it too polished, it may look like a sales presentation. Well, you actually like the rough cut. Like, if you've ever heard Craig Newmark speak, he doesn't like super polished things. He doesn't like big words. He doesn't like policy speak. He doesn't like white papers. He wants, how do you talk to everyday Americans in a way they understand and will act upon? So we've been trying to keep this deliberately rough-edged. Okay. We launched here last year in the cavalry track. Wired article did a launch piece that was very effective for opening doors. We basically said, I'm worried about more disruptions, larger disruptions, longer disruptions, more life-saving disruptions from accidents like CrowdStrike that had just happened a couple months earlier, or adversaries that want money. But what if it gets, it's already unsustainable for my neighbors. What if it gets to weapons of war, which it will as early as 2027? The pilot couldn't chase everything, so let's say not just are these 4 lifeline basic human needs more important than banking or other stuff, or IT or Angry Birds. They are the things that keep us from being Lord of the Flies, but they're also highly interdependent. So the pilot said, let's look at the interdependence between water and emergency care. So back to Maslow's, it's just the bottom, the stuff that keeps us being Lord of the Flies. I'm not worried about continuity of the economy for this project. There's plenty of people that care more about continuity of the economy. I'm not worried about forced mobilization, which is a fancy word for can we get our tanks to the country we need to fight in. Someone else needs to be. I'm not doing that. And it's interesting when we overlap which national critical functions both of us need, and it's non-zero. But we said, let's do these specifically in the first year, water, wastewater, emergency care, and then if we got more funding, we weave in power and food supply, hence why you heard some talks on all 4 of these domains over the last 2 days. And the staged idea is because this is heavy and disruptive and confusing and scary, and no one wants to be the villain in the story, everyone wants to be the hero in their own story, we're giving each stakeholder group upstream a couple months of engagement to go through their 5 stages of grief and get their footing and realize I can do something about this. So I'm gonna go to the owners and I went to the owners and operators first, like the water engineers, before I go to City Hall. When they go to City Hall and they freak out, they're gonna call in water, they're gonna call in power, they're gonna call in the hospital, and you know what they're gonna get? Good answers, competent, confidence-building answers, because we gave someone a chance to win. And I'm just gonna do the same thing after that to go to everyday Americans. And like I said the other day, Bryson does not want me to go to everyday Americans. Some of my friends have good reasons why they don't want me to go to everyday Americans. And maybe I don't have to, but I'm pretty sure I'm gonna have to. But I'm willing to not do so if we can solve it without them. So it becomes a forcing function that when I give 5 questions you should ask at town hall, the people at town hall know what those questions are, have good answers for them. So let's give everyone a chance to orient and succeed. That last row is you. We want to help the helpers be helpful. One of the cool things we learned is the highest consequence failure is a water hammer, for example. And this is something that, especially in the nation's aging pipes that are way past their expiration date, a 24-inch main, I think, is that one, maybe 36, but they can get as big as 48. It's a lot of force in water. You don't always get to pick the time and place of where the burst happens. There may be more than one burst on more than one pressure zone. Think of this like a circuit, and you might have circuit breakers. So I had to learn a lot about this, and we learned it because of the empathy. Back to the point about hospitals that Ray was making. An individual hospital going out could hurt you and your family, but you might have one that you can drive to. But not when everybody's water, no hospital. If you didn't get the stickers, hold up the stickers. We have no water, no hospitals, no kidding stickers. And we have the water hammer sticker so that you can remember how to spell this thing and how to get involved. So if you want to fight a water hammer, do you add cyber shields up? No, maybe, but probably not in the next 12 to 18 months. The time to prep for that was a long time ago. So, thanks to the great work from Idaho National Labs. Raise your hand. Did anybody see Ginger and Andrew Monday in their talk here? Amazing, right? Did anybody go to their free 4-hour training on how to do cyber-informed engineering? I like to call it consequence-informed engineering. Free, applied to water. Anybody go to that? I heard some people over the moon yesterday at the bar. They loved it. We're gonna do a lot more of those together over the next 12 to 14 months. The idea is don't add cyber, engineer down consequences. You're going to be hacked, you're gonna be compromised, the punch will be thrown. Can you take the punch? Not can you restore and recover. Everybody says resilience is, well, you're gonna get knocked down, how quickly can you restore and recover? When it's a ventilator and the patient dies, there's no restore and recovery. I don't have resurrection powers, right? If there's a burst water main, the restore and recovery is replace a water main, which could be a couple days or a week if it's the only one in the city or the town or the county. But when they're everywhere, good luck being first or second in line to get all those repaired. So the notion that we could just recover quickly from a backup, test your backups, no. When it comes to OTICS and this kind of stuff, it's prevent or absorb. It's not recover. So we talked about engineering consequences. Circuit breaker in your house is what allows a spike of power to not burn down the walls. We can make similar things, and we talked to engineers about if this is the worst case, are there available familiar solutions? And the answer was an analog pressure sensor on the pressure zone of the hospital that knows it's never supposed to be above X PSI. If it sees it goes above that, we'll have a physical wire go to the pump and shut it off, not through the hackable, ICS and SCADA systems, but just a physical kill switch. And yes, it's a temporary denial of service, but it's not an explosion of a water main on the pressure zone for the hospital. Can't do it everywhere, maybe, but it was like $2,000, $10,000. You have to do some planning and testing and maintenance for sure. I'm not trying to trivialize that, but there is an available countermeasure for that thing. There's other scenarios our adversaries could do that wouldn't work for, but that's why we're trying to teach CIE. We talked about ways to do this at RSA. You saw some of that Monday if you were able. Grace Mena talked about volunteering, and one of the ways a lot of us, I'm helping to advise this thing. It's called the Cyber Resilience Corps, CORPS, not CORE. It's getting its legs. It's probably not going to be to its full intended fighting force by 2027. And if you get on there, you're going to see most of these ways to volunteer are not consequence-informed engineering or cyber-informed engineering. They're mostly privacy things, website hardening things. But this group can and should put out a shingle for how to help on water or power or whatnot. So, and we're already in communication of setting up our intake. In fact, I hired someone who started Monday while I was here that's going to be managing most of the community intake and actions. We did critical effect with Bryson Bort. Bryson Bort had a conference called Hack the Capitol. It sounded like we were attacking the Capitol. It was going to be its 8th one. And because people hated the name but loved the ICS OT content in DC, I said, let's merge and join forces. Undisruptible's time-sensitive focus and mission on target-rich, cyber-poor, owners and operators of water, power, access to emergency care, food supply, and give homework to all the speakers that we want ways to buy down risk in 12 to 18 months. No more navel gazing, no more 10-year cycles, like what can we do now? So we invited way more owners and operators and got a ton of water content, and many of the speakers here were also there. One of the things we announced there through Craig Newmark, it's a little blurry, is he liked the mission, he liked the pilot's results. We needed to change our theory of change, but he committed $3.2 million over the next 2 years for a very specific plan of action under a new theory of change that I'm about to outline. So we didn't want to build a bridge to nowhere, but now that we have gas in the tank and a refined theory of change, it's time to go. So what is that going to look like? Notice food's not on there. It's not that we don't care about it. There's things in the center of the bullseye, and there's things that are going to be adjacent to the bullseye. But we think teaching people the muscles of CIE and multi-stakeholder planning will radiate outwards. Some of the pictures I'm going to show you were given to me this morning, so I haven't even really stitched together the narrative, but that's okay. So what do we got here? I have a hospital at the top. Let me try to make this a little brighter. There's a hospital at the top. the center of our bullseye for the next path forward is the highest consequence failure is going to be a denial of patient care for one of our 6,000 communities. So that is the center bullseye. How do we make sure none of our nation's hospitals go down? In order to do that, we think the weakest link is likely the water. So we're going to convene water owners and operators, probably a water hammer. It's also power, and it's also going to involve both that town hall or municipal leadership and probably Blake-type people, emergency management, incident command center people, public health officials. So we have a 5-stakeholder cell that we need to make sure that we inform, influence, inspire. Initially, the theory of change was we had an information gap. No one had heard of this. If we just tell them, they'll go fix it. Nope. We also have a motivation gap and an enablement empowerment gap that the new theory of change will bridge. Don't read this all. You don't need to memorize this all. But after like back and forth and back and forth and back and forth across the Cyber Civil Defense Network and Craig, it kept getting more and more confusing to people. So I just did this run-on sentence that finally got us somewhere to a new place where I said, we can prevent losses of American lives by getting on the ground with a dozen hospital communities, helping them blunt the worst punches China can throw at their water, run regional exercises and demonstrations with these stakeholders, record and amplify their voices and stories to their peers, and then ensure these strategies can scale nationally within available time and resources, ... And if you saw Grace's talk, ... And then create more awareness and demand for many of your other funded activities. I actually don't want most people to avail themselves of the Cyber Resilience Core offerings yet if they're in these lifeline critical infrastructures. Before we go into cyber, I want to make sure we can take a punch. And then I want to hand them to initiatives like DEF CON Franklin, which are also doing water, that can help with initial crawl, walk, run on cyber mitigations to maybe make it less likely to be hit. Maybe, but probably not against the PLA, probably not in the next 12 to 18 months. PLA is the People's Liberation Army. So the bottom line is real world action to help hospitals and their water systems that they depend upon to protect their communities. And then we're going to show what works so others can follow. We believe the best ambassadors for change will look and talk and dress like their peers. So it's not going to be me or somebody in Washington. It's going to be somebody wearing flannel and Carhartts talking at their conferences to their peers about this is what we learned, this is the feel, felt, found, before, during, and after. We tried this stuff, it worked, you can too, okay? And again, storytelling and meeting people where they are. So there were 4 or 5 aspects to this. We're gonna work directly with communities, a dozen. We'll talk about that visually in a second. We need to capture and share their stories in various methods. We need to anticipate scaling risks. When I ran the CISA COVID task force, we weren't supposed to do non-cyber stuff initially, but we were really good at cross-sector cascading failure type things. So when we knew that the initial batch of Pfizer vaccine needed ultra-cold refrigeration, and there were only so many ultra-cold refrigerators in the country, then we had to find an alternative platform like dry ice. And dry ice is normally abundant, but it's a byproduct of gasoline enrichment, which no one was driving, so we didn't have any of that. So we had to get really, really creative about, even if we have this pressure sensor arrestor that's $2,000, what if there's not enough parts? What if there's not enough technicians to install it? So we want to innovate narrowly with these pilots and then replicate widely, and that may require pretty interesting cross-sector supply chain analysis and mitigations, which my team had a great experience doing, and I just recruited someone who left CISA to help me as one of my hires. Okay. Running hands-on cascading failures. Sometimes you got to blow shit up. If anybody ever seen the Aurora attack at Idaho National Labs, the diesel generator? Okay. It unfortunately got eclipsed by the Google Aurora espionage campaigns from China that everyone conflates the two. I don't know if you know this, but that Aurora attack at Idaho National Labs was the inspiration for a Democratic congressman from Rhode Island named Jim Langevin to found the Cyber Caliphate with bipartisan sense. Not Cyber Caliphate, the Cyber Caucus. Sorry, Jim. You might recall Jim and Will Hurd were the first congressmen to come to Hacker Summer Camp in DEF CON 25. Bo and I brought the 2 of them as a delegation from DC to DEF CON to build trust and build work. But Jim started the Cyber Caucus in the House. and was driving force on the bipartisan Cyber Solarium Commission, which passed most of the positive cyber we've seen. And the wind beneath his wings in a lot of ways was Nick Leiserson, one of 2 congressional staffers with a computer science degree back when I went on the Hill in 2014. The other one you've met before was Jessica Wilkerson, who ended up at the FDA eventually. They had been a force of nature standing up things, including the Office of National Cyber Director, where Nick was the first hire, and now Nick works on Undisruptable. So we're really happy to have Nick as well. But one of the things we have to do is show people that a failure in the water can cause this problem, can cause that problem. And that might mean going to a military base or a national lab or something like Plum Island and blowing some stuff up. And storytelling sometimes includes media. So we'll talk about media in a minute, and Congress. And then we want to build on-ramps to all the great cyber core event, cyber civilian, cyber civil defense network and the cyber resilience core volunteers, because they do need cyber as well. We just have to live to fight another day and avail ourselves of that. So we pitched some metrics of what are we gonna do in the first several months, and one of them that you've already tasted is the train the trainer workshops for consequence-informed engineering, which is really called cyber-informed engineering. Like I said, I'm deliberately blurring those lines. And Ginger has given me some dispensation to do so. Okay. So the changing theory of change in my last couple minutes here, and remember, I could talk all the way up till the keynote, but none of us should miss Casey's keynote. It's got a lot of heart, pun intended. But theory time, if you know heavy spoilers. We thought we had an information gap, but we also have a motivation enablement gap. And I didn't want to get on the ground with 12 communities for a couple weeks at a time with a big expensive entourage, but we're gonna have to do it because we wanna remove every single excuse. We want your senator or your congressman to have nominated your town, for example, and put pressure that, oh, we better do something to look good for the so-and-so or whatever. And then we want to pay for, if we have to, some of those small engineering mitigations as we create recipes and playbooks and document them, capture the stories before, during, and after, not just the facts, but the feelings and the belief structures. And then we're gonna replicate those. So we have to pull the thread on all 3. So that's innovate narrowly. So what do we mean by that? Let's take the water example, because I really bound to water in the pilot. 151,000 water plants across these United States. 50,000 of them service homes. 6,000 of them touch and support hospitals. And I'm picking 12 of those, and I need your help nominating them because we need to cast a wide enough net to not miss any edge cases. So see these little tiny specks? They'll probably be more visible if I share the deck. These are 6,000 hospital communities. I'd like to say they're blue, but they're more likely not blue right now. Almost none of them have, only 650 of those 151,000 are a part of the ISAC. We have a 0.4% participation in the ISAC. None of them have mandatory cyber controls like NERC and FERC for power. I don't know how many of them serve a hospital, but probably a much smaller number than 650. So if this is the current idea, we want to pick 12 of them. I have 3 picked already. Might not tell you what they are. We're gonna nominate them. We're gonna pick some red and blue states. We're gonna pick maybe at most 2 cities. At most. It's mostly gonna be urban, suburban, rural, and unique environments. That could be topography is unique, like a flood zone. It could be strategically important, like this river goes to supply these things at these points. It could be near a port, a major port for the US. But we have to pick 12 that surface anything we've overlooked as best as possible. And if we are lean, maybe we'll do more. And if people want to make more cities, maybe they can add more fuel. We thought the information gap was the only thing, so you can fix that with education, but we have a motivation gap and an enablement empowerment. So the assess is when we get on the ground with those stakeholders. We're gonna experiment and fuzz this and co-create. I could give them a solution. I'd rather we make one together. So there's buy-in, participation, ownership. We might be educated by Andrew's new book on CIE for water. We might come up with new recipes because those aren't practical in some of these edge cases. We're gonna capture those stories as many ways as we can. Interviews, film, long form podcasts, short social media things, 60 minutes style exposés. And then we have to, once we have things that work, replicate in probably the next 9 to 12 months after we've gotten what we think is diminishing returns on those. If we use those beachheads of these 12, we can then replicate to the other 6,000 of the 6,000 hospital towns. And then someone's gonna say, well, I'm not a hospital town, but we have dialysis centers, or we have a data center, or we make 40% of the country's supply of medical oxygen. We need it too for oxygen. I agree. You heard yesterday the really uncomfortable talk about AI data centers might be more important. I talked to someone who did an international exercise, and I said, did you guys restore the data centers first or the hospitals first? And they said the data centers. And I said, okay, do you restore the data centers or this first? Like, hospitals were not in the first 4 answers. So I would like to think we're gonna keep our citizens alive. So far, none of the exercises I've seen have prioritized hospitals. And if you don't like that answer, we have to do something to change that answer. They might be right, which is what I'm wrestling with from the amazing provocation we got yesterday on stage. First talk, go watch it. But we're really entangled. So the time to have these conversations is now, but I'm gonna go to those 6,000 hospitals, and then if you ever saw the PERT Plus commercials, because I'm really frickin' old, I told 2 friends, and they told 2 friends, and they told 2 friends. So maybe, instead of a top-down regulatory push or government push from a very politically divided country, each individual community that wants themselves safe starts and innovates, and then we use things like the National Governors Association, and NACIO, and NACIO, and Blake's conferences to give people not just problems, but problems with effective, proven solutions and testimonials. Okay, so this is the heart of the team. This is the minimum viable team. We're gonna make as many of them as we can. We wanna go from really prone to at least safer for the 6,000 hospitals. There's a couple reasons for that. They replicate widely. When we did the Cisco task force, we only had 6 months to fix some of these target-rich cyber poor. We had 66 ball bearings, we called them, but they were small, unguarded, weak links in the vaccine supply chains. It had 3 IT people, 0 security people. You could sneeze on one of them and you'd have a lot of dead Americans because they were the sole source manufacturer of something required for 7 of the vaccine candidates. So we did practical things like get your shit off Shodan. Just fix the KEVs. Do a nightly scan for free from CISA. Just fix the KEVs. KEV was not published prior to this effort. What are the bad practices? Screw best practices. What are the bad practices? So that's why even before we do those, we're doing consequence-informed engineering or cyber-informed engineering. As we get these stories, everybody's got a podcast, right? So I'm sort of kidding and I'm sort of not. We might want long-form empathy building, harmonization of terms with water operators, with hospital leaderships, and nurses like Dina from yesterday. We might want to capture these, slice them up, and as we get a really good story of what is a water hammer after all, then we make the animated explainer that comes out of those long-form conversations. If you want to listen to one bit, you do. One segment, you do. All of it, you do. But we're going to capture those stories. We're going to animate the things that matter. With a dozen communities of really motivated ambassadors, guess what we have on a silver platter? A segment for something like a 60 Minutes or a Nightline or whatever. So when we do want to go to everyday Americans, we can bring something super scary and super manageable. Part of the reason to do that is we also want to have readily available witnesses for Congress. Not that they're going to do a lot to help, but they can convene and help us amplify with a bully pulpit. And there's a stretch goal. I'm not a sports ball person, but I've heard that once in a while, maybe I used to play, sometimes it's really easy to catch pop fly and people don't catch it. They stumble, they hesitate, or they crash into each other. You know, maybe the confidence and the brazenness of our adversaries to throw this punch could be, oh, maybe they could take the punch. Maybe we don't throw the punch. Or maybe our boss, we want to throw the punch, but our boss won't let us throw the punch. So, you know, maybe if we're really, really lucky, we can also cause some hesitation. I'm at 2 minutes left. So the one thing I'll do in a rapid fire, maybe I'll take a few more minutes, but let's go through what we talked about in this track, just to remind people. And if you didn't see them, great news is we recorded them. So here we go. We opened up with what is the undisruptible concern and asking you to be comfortably uncomfortable. We even had a guest appearance from Bryson to talk about the doctrinal philosophy of how China specifically conducts all unrestrained warfare and what they hope to accomplish with something like Volt Typhoon, which is both a deterrent to keep us out of Taiwan, which we won't. It's to undermine public support for our intervention, because if we're all starving for water and food and Lord of the Flies, we may not support continued intervention, and it's also to delay, degrade the mobilization of tanks and warfighting equipment, which this would absolutely do. So we set the table, then we had a 2-hour water block. Unfortunately, Dean could not come. As a water engineer, he was dealing with an actual water crisis. But luckily, we had resilience and tolerance and had incredible presentations from Idaho National Labs' Ginger and Andrew previewing his book, and also both of them previewing their 4-hour free training over the next door that many of you were able to take. And you will have additional chances in the future to take. In the afternoon block, we talked to Blake and Scott about ICS, not industrial control systems, but incident command systems, NIMS, the National Incident Management System, and maybe ways to look at bidirectionally learning from each other. But what I really wanted you to take away from that is if you want to help write a boom, you have to learn at least those 2 courses they talked about. You have to learn their language. You need to snap into their crisis management. All crisis management is local, and you will be ignored if you're not prepped and certified or credentialed prior. So if you want to be doing that, start the process now, and we'll have much more from him and others later. We had an EMT and emergency 911 folks give us a presentation on cascading failures, and then we ended the day with, in my opinion, too short. I loved it, but it left me wanting more, but an overview of Mesh-tastic and LoRa and other alternative communication technologies you could use if the phones go out from Salt Typhoon, if the landlines go out, which they almost likely certainly will. So what are ways that you can now play with cheap technology to have non-zero comms with each other and with maybe the water plant and the hospital you wish to help? Yesterday, we started with the power block with the really uncomfortable, if this was the 101 on how screwed we are, they took it to level 800, and I still have to digest a lot of what I felt and then process during that. But they're basically saying, don't just look at the 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound sack we have now, because we're rapidly building AI data centers with massive power demands, massive water demands, and economic prioritization above and beyond our own concern of these cohorts. They don't even need to be attacked to cause denial of patient care, just from how dynamic and chaotic the load and unloads can be. So watch that. We then had an amazing 2-hour block on healthcare. We also had Joe Slowick talk about ransomware was the canary in the coal mine to show us some of how disruption can happen from a nation state, but at a wider scale. We had a 2-hour block on healthcare with Dr. Christian Demeth, who helped start CyberMed Summit. He's been coming to DEF CON since he was a teenager. Nurse Dina Carlisle, who was one of the victims of Ascension Health, multi-state outage, and McLaren Health, and wrote a demand letter on how nurses need to be trained and how you have to adjust nurse-to-patient ratios to keep patients safe under fire. And Bo Woods from day one of the cavalry, always worth watching. But I was really excited to see 2 things from Christian that we did not heard before. One is his cyber crash cart way to assist a single down hospital. You can see how amazing that could be, but also we're not going to be able to do it to all 6,000 concurrently. So great idea that we might need to hyperscale faster. And he also looked at their ability to notice the impact of the CrowdStrike outage on at least a third of the nation's hospitals they were able to study in great detail. So please watch that if you haven't. We then did Hackers Kinda Like to Eat with a different Andrew, and we were able to tell it over the intertubes, and Curtis from the Bio-ISAC. The Bio-ISAC is not the food ISAC or the healthcare ISAC. They kind of catch the things dropped by both. And he both showed some of the national security cascading failures for the nation's water food supply, but also, much like David's talk this morning, some thoughts on your own food resilience at home. And then today we started with how can you volunteer? Oh, no, we added, at the end of the day, we had end-of-life devices should not lead to end-of-life for humans. And we took some people that are looking generically at IoT policy, end-of-life support contracts, and things like that. But then we asked them to say, can we look at obsolete end-of-life unpatchable devices in water and power and hospitals, and maybe use that as a crucible to finally get some of those policies across the finish line, much like the cavalry did to get the Patch Act passed into law for medical devices to have minimum cybersecurity hygiene, even though almost nothing else does. So we went really narrow on a life safety thing that can now be replicated to other life safety things. And we're hoping that that stimulated some conversation. And then this morning, Grace graced us with her presence on volunteerism, both through Cyber Civil Defense, Cyber Resilience Corps, things like I Am the Cavalry and Undisruptible. And we are, in fact, asking you to volunteer in some way, shape, or form. It's like Fight Club, you choose your own level of involvement, but there are many levels to this. And now we have a community manager to help us do it. David gave you some preview. Here are the people in your neighborhood and what you can do. And I'm trying to bring it home that these are hard, they're uncomfortable, we have little time. We might get a bonus year or two, but we're gonna have to learn storytelling, empathy, pick these 12 cities. The first 3 are gonna be messed up. We're gonna make tons of mistakes. But please nominate something in your state or where you grew up and why. Because we're gonna go really quickly into the selection process, like maybe as early as the next 2-3 weeks. So this is your invitation to join the Slack. Because no hospital, no water, no hospitals, no kidding. Here's the sticker for the water hammer. We're gonna make more stickers. This is just this batch for this time. We do know we're gonna need introductions and help through things like the National Government Association, State EMS, and CERT. CERT is not computer emergency response, it's community emergency response. They wear a green hat. The CLTC communities, different universities already have a footprint. Those will give longer, deeper trainings to fewer people, but that could be one of the arrows in our quiver. We're gonna do some demonstrations and exercises, and we also know the insurance industry has to play a role, so I've been helping CyberAccuView, which is a consortium of the top 20 underwriters of insurance. We probably need to do a concerted effort on specific bad edge devices that we know are already implicated in Volt Typhoon, so if your community is using them, we probably need to replace them with something better. Secure by design, secure by default, and I'd like to think this project can nicely add secure by demand, because nothing done today to make a better device is going to get there in time for now. But what we can do is make these water plants beg their current suppliers to do something to ameliorate their legacy risk. So there might be a nice opportunity to team secure by design and secure by default to do secure by demand. Liability has been on the table and not existing, but this could be the thing that finally gets us software liability after 35, 40 years of not doing so after the Therac 25 machine. And just like Operation Warp Speed, we may see a named operation, and people in this room might be called to serve to make sure the national security, public safety needs are there. This barcode, which no one should ever do QR codes, right? Will get you to the Undisruptible 27 site where you can get in the Slack. And that's currently the intake for our volunteer platform for how you can say what you're willing and able to do and where you're willing and able to do it, for how long you're willing and able to do it, into the Cyber Resilience Core platform. It's hammer time, folks, because we are over-dependent on undependable things, and the wolves are at the door. They're in the house. So cavalry is not coming. I thank you for your time for the last 2.5 days. I hope that you go upstairs to be inspired by Casey. I hope you had a wonderful B-Sides Las Vegas. I hope you enjoyed the 12th year of I Am the Cavalry, and you can go back and look at the entire back catalog if you like. And I hope that you consider being one of our teammates in this noble fight. I will talk until, even all the way upstairs, but you are released. But I will definitely take questions and feedback until we walk upstairs and maybe walk together. Bye-bye. Are the videos available, or is there only you? My videos, the 2? Yeah, they're available. Where? On the website, it's one of them, or if not both of them, and they will be there next week if I have to, okay? Thanks.